Now let's welcome our speakers to give a brief self-introduction.
Thank you, Kitty. It's great being here. I'd like to thank Kitty, the PGS, and BTI for inviting me to join you today. So I'll give you an introduction. There weren't many rules on this, so I'm sure you'll see 3 very different versions. So this is truly my unique version. Like Kitty said, my name is Jesse Munkvold. I'm a research scientist and I lead a group called Applied Technologies at Corteva AgriScience, which is the agricultural division of Davon Dupont. And if you don't know what's going on there, I'll describe a little bit more about that later, because it's a very interesting time. So I thought I'd start and give you my kind of whole history. Who am I? Where am I from? Where have I been? And so I was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so from the Midwest. For the first 12 years of my life, I lived in Sioux Falls, spent a year in Trinidad and Tobago when I was 4 years old, which I still remember a little bit of, and then moved to Rapid City, South Dakota, where I lived until I was 12, and then my family moved to Minnesota. And I was there from 12 years old through high school. And so I really consider myself being from Minnesota, even though I was born in South Dakota. I went back to South Dakota to get my BA in biology at Augustana University. So it's a small liberal arts college. That was my degree, was biology, not any other specialization. But while I was there, I was able to do summer research for 3 years. We had a new faculty member who was a wheat geneticist. He had funding left over from his postdoc that he brought, and I was fortunate enough to do research during the summer for him. And going in to college, I knew I liked genetics, but I didn't know what direction I wanted to go, and it was really that experience with plants as an undergrad that led me into this track to continue working on plants. So after I finished my bachelor's, I came here to Cornell University in the plant breeding and genetics department, working for Dr. Mark Sorrells. He's a wheat breeder and geneticist, and in his lab I got experience in the field, but then I also did a lot of genomics work, transcriptomics work, and that formed the basis of my PhD dissertation. I stayed with Mark for a little before coming to BTI. So when I was a PhD student, my minor was in plant pathology. I was interested in plant pathology. I was really ready for a change, and that led me to Greg Martin's lab here, where I worked on natural variation of ETI and PTI in tomato. And so in 2011, I was ready again for a change. I was ready to begin my career, and I found an opportunity as a trait bioinformatician at KeyGene Inc., which is based in Rockford, Maryland. And KeyGene Inc. is a wholly owned subsidiary company of KeyGene, which is based in the Netherlands. And so KeyGene Inc. was a very small company, only about 10 people were in that research group. And so it was very much like a startup company feel, even though we had this larger parent company that was based in the Netherlands. And at KeyGene, I really got to do some very interesting things. A lot of it was around discovering genes that were important for plant traits and then using a mutation breeding pipeline to make new variation in those genes and test those for effects in the trait of interest. I got a lot of experience. I learned a lot there. And what I learned is that I was seeking more opportunities and more stability that could be provided by a larger company rather than the very small company that I was working for. And in 2014, that led me to the genomic breeding group at Dow AgriSciences in Indianapolis. And coming into that position, I very quickly learned that my role wasn't what was posted. It was actually, there was something else that was needed, and that was helping to coordinate the genomic selection work that they were implementing in all their breeding programs, and particularly in corn. And so I ended up leading the integration of that technology into the production breeding work. And that was fantastic. That was exactly where I wanted to be, was in between the labs and the breeders and helping form the strategy for using those tools. So in 2017, I didn't change jobs, but the job under me changed. And that's because of this merger between Dow and DuPont that happened. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. But through this merger, I maintained a position but became a leader of what's called applied technologies. What we do in that group is we look at the application of new technologies in breeding and do a lot of the in-field experimentation that's needed to validate those technologies. So that's about my work life, and I'll come back to that a little bit. But I also wanted to tell you about my personal life. So I'm married, currently live in Carmel, Indiana, which is a suburb of Indianapolis. And so my wife is Kathy Munkvold, who some of you may know. She was also a postdoc here at BTI. Actually, she was a postdoc a little bit longer than I was, but also in the Marple lab. And right now, she just left her position as a scientist at Beckman Coulter and is looking for a new position because we are moving to Des Moines, Iowa as part of the new position in Corteva. So I have two young daughters, Elsa, who's 8, and Ruby, who's 5, so a second grader and a kindergartner. I love this picture of my wife and the two girls during the solar eclipse last summer. In Indianapolis, it was a near total. We were just outside of that kind of cone of totality. There were clouds, but peeking through the clouds, we got a good opportunity to see the eclipse. And this was them at school that day. So I have hobbies. I don't get to do them a lot because of having two young girls, but they include hiking, biking, fishing, running, lots of things outdoors, reading, and trying to grow orchids. I don't have the best setup being in, near Indianapolis. It's mostly done on my windowsills, but I greatly enjoy it. And I've met, I think he's an 85-year-old orchid breeder that lives outside of Indianapolis. And you can go to his ramshackle greenhouses and see the beautiful orchids that he's breeding there. And I enjoy that. So then just a little bit more about what I do. I mentioned it previously, but I'll expand a little bit, not too much in the details, but more in the concepts. And so really, the goal of my job and what I kind of have a passion for is helping breeders increase their genetic gain through the implementation of new technologies. And so we're at an extremely interesting time in the industry and in plant breeding, where we have access to a lot of data that we didn't have before. We have access to tons of genetic and genomic data, to environmental data, and to performance data, which really is billions of data points that's flowing through the program. We can use that and we can derive parameters for the breeding program from it, from real data that we have. And we can use that to model different breeding scenarios. And then we can look at those scenarios, we can test them, and develop new breeding programs, new breeding strategies that will increase genetic gain. So we'll increase the rate of improvement that we see in our crops. And this is something that I've worked very intimately with all the components that go into it, with the breeders, with the data scientists, with the labs that generate some of the data. And the real thing that drives me is seeing the impact that these technologies and this process has had on the company. And I was talking with Prashant yesterday, and he asked me, well, if you don't publish a whole lot, you don't do a lot of talks when you're in industry, what gives you satisfaction from your work? And this right here is what I told him gives me satisfaction, is that's seeing the impact. So here's just kind of a summary of introducing genomic selection into our breeding programs. We've been able to increase our selection of crosses. So how to improve our selection of crosses by 1.2 times. We've been able to also improve our selection of progeny 1.3 times, increase our advancement decisions, so improve how we're deciding which materials move forward in the breeding programs by 1.2 times. And that last graph, we've increased what we would think of as our capacity in the breeding program by 25 times. And that's because we're able to do things using simulation on the computer that we could never do in the field. We estimated last year that the predictions, the hybrid predictions in corn that we produce, that the breeders use to make very early decisions in their breeding program, if we had grown out all of those hybrids, it would have taken the entire arable land in the United States to grow those trials. So it's an incredible increase in what we can do. So this is happening in this very interesting time in the ag industry that I mentioned previously. And so I mentioned that Dow and DuPont have merged. That merger was completed in September. It was announced back in December of 2015. So we went through almost 2 years of this interim period where we were merging the companies, but we weren't really merged. So we could talk to each other, but we couldn't really talk to each other. It was an interesting time. If you're interested, talk to me about that later and I'll tell you more. But Dow and DuPont, Dow is of course a well-known chemical company, but owns Dow AgroSciences, where I was working. DuPont, also a very well-known historical company, owns DuPont Pioneer and also DuPont Crop Protection. These two companies coming together, the plan is that they will spin out 3 separate companies. One will be an agriculture-only focused company, and that's now been named just a couple months ago, and that's Corteva AgriScience. And right now we have to make sure that we say the agriculture division of Dow DuPont because we haven't spun out yet. That company contains Dow AgroSciences, DuPont Pioneer, and DuPont Crop Protection. And as of when it spins out, it will be the largest agricultural company in the world. Now, depending on what happens with the Bayer Monsanto, we may be number 2, but it'll be neck and neck. The other 2 companies are going to be chemical-related companies. There will be a material science company, which is kind of your more standard chemical company, and a specialty products, which you can think DuPont developed Kevlar, products like that. But the interesting thing that's happening here is, of course, in the agriculture company. Here's an opportunity to be exclusively focused on agriculture, which our heritage companies, weren't. We were part of a larger company. So now we have that opportunity. And we're taking the opportunity to really change the culture, to take the best of both of these companies, to put them together and derive a culture that's really new and valuable. And that's something that everybody's taking very seriously, and the senior leadership is taking very seriously. It's developing this culture. And so this is part of the mission statement here. At Corteva AgriScience, we seek to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume. This means we will help rejuvenate the agricultural ecosystem to support people on the planet to ensure progress for generations to come. And when you read that, you think that that's, it's kind of good marketing speak and it sounds nice. But that really, truly is the mindset that's forming within the company. We're seeking to be radically transparent in a way that agricultural companies have not been in the past. We're seeking to really reach out to others with our technologies and share them for the improvement of agriculture as a whole, not just creating the products within our company. And so I wanted to show just a quick 1-minute video that I think captures that spirit. And so when you see this video, think that it's not just going externally, that these are the behaviors and the thoughts and feelings that are growing within this new company. So hopefully I can get it to play.
It's the same thought and drives what we do. Growing food for tomorrow, growing tomorrow itself, hand in hand, enriching lives, and themselves better. We're growing products by making every crop, field, farm stronger. We're growing products by being the most innovative, most inclusive, most open agriculture company in the world. And our new role will bring more innovators to the table. Employees, producers, consumers, the best of the best, together, not just to meet standards, but to set them. We are Corteva AgriScience, and this is the company we're creating. We're one company. We're leading the way. We're growing progress. Introducing Corteva AgriScience.
And so I'm very happy to be here to talk with you all about my experience that's led to my current position and my experience right now. So thank you.
Good morning. You're supposed to respond. Good morning. Right. I'm Tom Ruttledge. I have a very different career than Jesse does. And when Kitty asked me to do this, maybe I was a little surprised because I thought, what can I tell you? And then she's, like Jesse said, she wanted this to be kind of open and didn't give us a lot of guidelines and told us to make an introductory slide, of which I made one, and only one. There it is, right? And Kitty is now mad at me, I think, because I only made one. And there it is. And I got it actually to change to that, which I'm proud of this morning. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'll do what Jesse did. I'm a Michigander by birth, but not by spirit. So I lived there through college, actually. So I was raised in the northern suburbs of Detroit, the most boring place on the planet. If you think you're from a boring place, I'm from a more boring place. Vanilla goes there to die. So my mother knows I hate it, so it's okay. And then I went to, much to my parents' horror on some level, I decided to enroll at Wayne State University in the heart of the city of Detroit. My parents, I don't think, had been in Detroit for about 15 years by the time that I enrolled there, and they were forced to take me down there. And I started out as a bio major pre-med, kind of your typical, what you see on Cornell's campus, right? Thousands of them. And I then took organic chemistry as a sophomore. So my progress to my career is going to be that line that Kitty showed you, right? Where you do this, right? And I'm going to let you know, hopefully today, that that's all right, right? That is absolutely fine. Because if you're like me, I'm 53, about to turn 54 on July 4th. So I've been in my professional life since postdoc for 25 years. And I have never in 25 years gotten up in the morning and not wanted to go to work. I love my job. I have the greatest job in the world. And that has been true of the multiple positions that I've had, and I'll tell you how I cycled through those. And I think if you can say that at my age, you will be the happiest person around. Right? Because there's a lot of people my age that are pretty miserable. This is why I actually deleted Facebook in January when I was in Paris, because I just couldn't take the bitterness of so many people spewing out on Facebook. And so I went to Wayne State. I added a degree in chemistry because of organic chemistry. And I was still pre-med. And here's how insecure I was about myself. I applied at the end of my junior year for medical school. I knew I didn't want to go, but in my mind I had to prove to people that I could get in and I could reject it. Because I didn't want to drop out and be perceived as that kid who failed out of the pre-med program. So I applied and was accepted to 3 medical schools. And then I went in and I told my father that I wanted to defer for you. And he said, why? And I said, because if I stay a 5th year at Wayne State, they will give me a second physical degree. Right? Instead of just having a double major, I will get 2 different bachelor's degrees. Know your parents' weaknesses. My dad has, I think, 9 degrees. And so my dad bought into this immediately and said, oh, stay a 5th year, 2 degrees for the kind of the price of 1 plus a year? Good, you're good to go. But I used that 5th year to basically come to terms with myself that I didn't want to go to medical school. And I made application to graduate school. And in that process, it was only chemistry. It was organic chemistry because that was the only field of chemistry that I liked. I hated general chemistry as a class. I have never taught it in my career because of that. I cannot do physical chemistry, although I appreciate its beauty. And I cannot do inorganic chemistry largely, although I appreciate its beauty. I am very, very, if I look at my colleagues at Cornell, I'm pretty ignorant compared to a lot of these people. So I got my PhD from a man named David Lynn at University of Chicago, who's no longer there. He would leave ultimately again and take a Asa Griggs-Candler named professorship at Emory University. That doesn't sound very prestigious, except the Candler family is in fact the Coca-Cola family. So he has an endowment that he can run a 12-person group without ever writing a grant again in his life. Although he does write grants and receives substantial support, in particular from HHMI. I would leave Chicago and I would come to this amazing place in 1992-93. And I would take a position in plant pathology, because we did organic chemistry of plants essentially at Chicago. We were an outlier. Everybody else at Chicago was doing kind of mainline synthetic organic chemistry at that point. And my advisor was a wacky guy who liked bio and chem like I did, and that's why I chose him. Right? I chose an advisor. I did what you were not supposed to do. They said, don't go to graduate school for only one person. Have 15 people that you can work there. And there were 15 people I wanted to work for at Illinois, and I went to Chicago, where there was only one that I was going to be happy working for. I did pregame it and say, will you take me if I come? And he said, I think I can. And so I went on that promise, right, which was pretty tenuous in hindsight. But I joined his group. I would come and then join the plant pathology department, which was an amazing experience here at Cornell, because I had been with Chem Geeks for 4.5 years. And then I was thrown into a very, very different department where plant pathology, if you don't know anything about it on this campus, is made up of scientists from all walks of life. You meet chemists, you meet plant breeders, you meet geneticists, right? All coming in there and working together. And I worked for, at then, a very young assistant professor named Eric Nelson, who is now retired from Cornell, right? I have outlasted him here. And Eric was an amazing advisor for me because he was human. And I say that, you guys think that scientists have no lives, right? And I know scientists that literally have no personal life. Their job is, I have colleagues that are in their 90s who are still coming in every day and working. That will not be me, right? I love my job, but I will leave it, right? Very clearly, because I have life outside of my job, which appeals to me. So I'm working for health insurance, basically, right now, right? Cornell has a 55-10 rule. I only have to make it one more year, and then I get health care and retirement, right? If you don't know about Cornell's rule, you should learn about it, right? It gives you the chance to retire at age 55. I don't know that I'm going at that 55, but I can. I still like my job. After a year, I had accomplished a lot of what he hired me to do. And he said, he came in the lab and he said, I can give you another year or two, and I'm happy to do so. But he said, you need to go. He said, it's time. You have done what you needed to do, and you need to move to something bigger than I can offer you. And I wouldn't have done that. Right? I would have stayed there because it was comfortable. I now knew it. And that little push he gave me was wonderful. And he was very supportive because I was a researcher who told him from the outset that I wanted to teach. And in some research labs, that means you get ostracized to like the back of the bus. Right? Oh, you want to teach? That's horrible. Right? You're not a real scientist. Go to the back of the bus. But he encouraged me, and I papered the planet with applications from that postdoc. You think you sent out a lot? I sent out more. It was over 120 I applied in every state except California and Texas because I had no desire to live in either of those states. California I didn't think I could afford. Texas I hate. Right? I'm sorry if you're from Texas. It's nothing personal against you. I just don't like hot and dry or hot and humid. They don't appeal to me. So in all of these, I got 2 offers. And this is going to be a pattern of my life will now start to emerge for you. One of them was a tenure track offer in Maryland, right, for a very high quality college. And one of them was a visiting assistant professorship at Whitman College, a very high quality liberal arts college in southeastern Washington. And all of my friends said take the tenure track position. And I took the visiting position. I said, I don't kind of know what I want in a job, so a year seems like maybe I can learn. And I took a job replacing, for a year, a sabbatic replacement, a senior chemist who was a very good teacher and actually stayed in town because he was writing a textbook and he served as a mentor to me. He taught me a lot about teaching, like dress better than your students. Right? That's one of the first things he told me. He said, you're going to need it because you look young and they're all going to not respect you because of that. In fact, they asked me to be on the club lacrosse team my first day on campus because they thought I was a student. That's when I didn't have this. Right? There's a lot of snow on the roof now. And I stayed there, and in October of that year, after only 2 months, I had been doing, I think, a good job because they came to me and said, we are creating a new tenure track position. We would like you to apply for it, wink, wink. And then we'll have another couple people in, wink, wink, and then we'll give you the job, wink, wink. Right? And I said, thank you, but no thank you. And they said, do you have another job? And I said, I haven't even applied yet. And that's decision number 2, crazy, of my life. Because I liked Whitman, but I didn't like where it was. I didn't like living in the dry climate, right? Some people like the West. I don't. I need green and I need it to be natural, right? And I understand that comes with some humidity, but it also comes with lakes and beautiful waterfalls, which I'm willing to accept in trade for not looking out at dust. Walla Walla would actually have dust storms a couple times a year, and they're horrific. Right? There's nothing worse than a dust storm in the world, in my opinion. So I would then send out about, I think, 30 applications. I became more targeted. I felt a little bit more confident. And I got something like 17 interviews on campus. And I got 6 offers. And I took a small Quaker college. I'm not religious, and I'm certainly not Quaker. And I was a little nervous about it, and they said, oh no, this is not really like Western Quakers, these are like Philadelphia Quakers, right, which are basically hippies, and we're accepting of everything, right? So we have rules against alcohol, but all the students drink. We have rules against dancing, but all the students dance, right? It was that kind of thing. So I went there, and you can see my dates are 94 to 99, and you're thinking, he got denied tenure. Right? So that's why he left, right? That's what you would read, right? If it was 6, you would say, bam, denied tenure, right? 5, you're like, he's trying to preempt a negative tenure decision. What I did was the 3rd outrageous decision of my career. I was 5.5 years in. I had submitted my tenure package to the college. My department recommended me for tenure, which was basically meant you were going to get tenure, and then I announced that I was going to resign. I had become unhappy with the administration of that college at that point, and I, at that point in my life, believed that there were good administrations, right? I would be disabused mostly of that perception over my career. Cornell's current administration notwithstanding. Faculty hate administrations, that's our job. And so I would apply for 6 jobs. Then in a very targeted search, I knew what I was looking for. I would get 6 interviews and I would get 6 offers. Right? I knew how to interview by this point. Right? And I should also note that each time I made these steps, my salary was taking precipitous rises. Right? The leaving of a job especially in academia, is really the only way that you get raises in this business, right? Because they'll just give you a set percent and they'll give everybody the set percent every year. That's what Cornell does. And without external offers or external movement, your salary doesn't really appreciably go up beyond your starting salary, right? So negotiate hard when you come in, because it's going to set your salary for your lifetime, right, if you don't intend to move. So I went, I had 6 offers, 5 with tenure, and 1 that couldn't give me tenure immediately because of a 2-year regulation in their handbook that said you had to be on campus for 2 years before tenure could be granted. Which job did I take? I gave up sure bet tenure at a college, and I moved to one where they said, in 2 years, we'll probably give it to you. And I went there, and in 2 years, I was granted tenure and associate, and promoted to associate professor. The college started to change not long after that, where the president had directed money to recruiting the best scientists. Our science college is a small liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia. It's in a conference with some heavyweight liberal arts colleges like Swarthmore, Haverford, Bryn Mawr. They used to beat up on us for admissions practice. Right? They would offer our students positions in their incoming class, and all of our students would take those positions because it was Swarthmore, right? And you would go there. So what we did was we tried to buy some of those great students back, right? We said, we'll give you full scholarships if you come here instead. Swarthmore's not going to do that. And for a number of years when I got to Ursinus, they bought students, science students. So I had great students. And then the new president decided that he wanted to shift that focus to arts. So he started giving the full scholarships to art, and we started getting horrible students. And at that point I said, oh boy, this is going south quickly, when I was in Australia. And I got an email from the then associate chair of the chemistry department at Cornell. I had started teaching in the summer of '99 here in the summer at Cornell, mainly to escape the heat of Philadelphia at that point. And the associate chair emailed me and he said, are you in the country? I want to call you. I said, well, I'm in Australia. And he said, let's do this by email. He said, I want to hire you, and I want you to come up here and become a lecturer and redo our organic lab program. And he said, we're willing to make this work for you. Right? And so I'm sitting in a tenured position, and I get offered a non-tenurable position. Right? I could never be tenured here. Right? And I took the job. Right? I will guarantee that I extracted money for my tenure. Right? From that process, right? I said, you got to buy me out of that process, so you got to do this monetarily. And they made it work, and I moved up here in the fall of '07 officially, even though I had been here in the summers since '99. And it was the greatest move of my career, right? I'm on 5-year contracts, which renew. I can leave at any time, and they can get rid of me in 5-year increments, right? And I work with an amazing student body from all over the world. I work with colleagues who are brilliant and inspire me every day that I come in. And we're doing remarkable things in chemistry today at Cornell. If you don't know what we're doing, you should. And so I'm going to say a little bit about what we've been successful in the last few years in particular. Myself, Professor Crane, and Professor Lee have a rather substantial HHMI grant from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute to try and increase underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. In particular in chemistry, because we're seen as the course where students bleed out of pre-med and pre-science fields, right? And they can't make it through Gen Chem and Organic. And we have taken students that Cornell admits, and for years was admitted, and letting fail. Right? Their most probable grades were C, D, and E in Gen Chem, and if they made it to Organic, their most probable grades were C, D, and E again. We have taken that batch of students and turned them, as a group, into their median GPA being a half a grade point higher than Cornell's median GPA. all students, right, in our large classes. Right? These are kids that come from often inferior high schools compared to some of our kids that come from $50,000 a year private high schools. And those kids now get beaten by those other kids. There's a field that we have leveled where we have a paper in process right now that we're submitting. Howard Hughes, the grant was for 5 years. We're in year 4 of it now. They've already expressed interest in another 5-year renewal for that because we're the first people to show data that you can change the outcomes. And this is my job. Right? I was a kid that went to a large state school. Cornell, to me, is a great school to teach at because while it is private, and I work for the private half of Cornell, most of my students come from the public parts of it. They're in Cal's and human ecology. And to educate kids like that and open doors like my door was opened years ago at Wayne State University, there's no greater job in the world, in my opinion. So I led through liberal arts colleges, which some of you might be thinking about. I certainly know a lot about getting jobs there, and I interviewed from the other side of the table every single year that I worked in academia. So I've looked at literally thousands of applications from people into those types of positions. And now I have ended up in a very different position at Cornell. But at age 53, I'm really happy. So what's my outside life, right, that is important to me? I'm single, right, and I have remained single my whole life because, as I told people at dinner last night, I had children when I was a kid. Right? I was one of 9 children. I'm done with that stuff, right? And I travel. This picture was taken during spring break of this year, right? This is in Virunga National Park in northern Rwanda, on the border where the tri-border of Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. And I lived in Kenya and Tanzania for 1.5 years during my pilgrimage through this career when I was working for Earlham College. And I travel all over the world. My next travel is in a couple of weeks to Burgundy. After that, Paris again, then Iceland and Finland in August. And then I have November booked is Costa Rica, and next spring break is Zanzibar. And I'm going back for the first time since I lived there in '97. I travel every single break, and I make a really good income. And I have a life outside of my job. And if there's anything I can recommend to you in life, it's to have a job you love first, right? And then make that a part of your life. Don't make it your whole life, right? Find your interests, find your wife, your daughters, right? Go look at the eclipse, right? Do those things in life and don't just be about your work. Let work be part of your life. And you can't take a more circuitous route to your career than I've taken, right? And it will be okay. The only unifying thing in all my decisions is I made the decision at every point that made me happy at that point. And that's the only advice I can give you. Make the decision that makes you happy. Don't make other people happy. Thank you. Oh, you got it. Good.
So my name is Erica Fishel. I'm the Director of Tech Transfer at the Davon Dupont Plant Science Center. And as people have previously said, we weren't given a lot of guidance on how to introduce ourselves, so this is yet another slightly different. I did make my slides knowing what the other two had done, so I've always been a procrastinator, and so I did have a little bit of insight. So I included a movie because I knew that Jesse had a movie. So I did my undergraduate at the University of Kansas. I went to Kansas. I'm from St. Louis. That's where I live now. My parents live there. The Danforth Center shares a zip code with my parents' address where they have lived for going on 50 years now. So I went to Kansas because it wasn't in Missouri. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I'd go to med school. I was fluent in French, so I picked up a degree in French. And then I, as part of my first year, was introduced to who would eventually become my mentor throughout my undergraduate as part of a Women in Science program. interviewed her and was like, hey, cool, plant biology, that sounds interesting. So I did a lot of ecology when I was doing my undergraduate, and ecology is interesting to some, it's not interesting to me, and so while I was doing my undergraduate, I learned about research opportunities for undergraduates, and that's actually what brought me here to Boyce Thompson during the summer of 2006. I worked in Haiyang Wang's lab, who's no longer here, but I do keep in touch, not as much with him, but with the postdoc that I worked with in his lab. And that really set the foundation. That's where I knew that I didn't want to do ecology, but that I wanted to be within plant biology still, and that I wanted to do molecular biology. I took a side route there because after I finished my undergraduate, I didn't really know if where I wanted to go to grad school. And so I worked for Sigma Aldrich, now Millipore Sigma, in St. Louis for a year as a large-scale production chemist. So I was the smallest person on the large-scale production they've ever hired. In fact, they wouldn't hire me. They had to try me out for 2 weeks, and they scheduled me for some of the most awful runs that you can imagine. So I worked a 24-hour shift. So I was on the day shift, and it was 24/7. I was part of that 24-hour, 7 days a week group. So it was a 12-hour shift, and my schedule was 2 days on, 2 days off, 3 days on, 2 days off, 2 days on, 3 days off, or 3 days on. So every other weekend, I had a 3-day weekend. Every other weekend I worked, and I loved it. I can tell you just all sorts of really fun and horrible stories. Horseradish root peroxidase, we would get in literally a semi-truck full of horseradish root that we put through a grinder, and the smell was just so potent that you had a full-face respirator on, and it was in an un-air-conditioned facility, so you'd come out of that facility and you'd pull your respirator off and you knew to lean over because the sweat would pour out of your respirator. One of the products that I made that I'm most proud of was NADPH, no longer the catalog number, but N7505. I made $1.5 million of that ultimately would go out to various labs. It was fun because I could go and I could come into the labs and I could read the catalog, like the production numbers. I loved it. It was a lot of fun. But it wasn't where I really wanted to be. I didn't want to just be a production chemist. I didn't want to be taking orders from someone and, doing an assay because someone told me I had to do it this way. I'd constantly get into battles with quality control and quality analysis because they wanted me to do the assay one way and I didn't think that that was the optimal way to use or to be able to show. And so I knew that I wasn't going to stay as a bachelor's level chemist. So I decided that I was going to still stay in St. Louis. I went to Washington University in St. Louis where I got my PhD. I applied all over, as many people do. It was a really hard decision between WashU, where I ultimately went, Washington State University, and then here, Cornell. Lots of reasons that went into that. Happy to discuss those. But I did go, and I worked in a new principal investigator's lab, Ram Dixit. I was his first graduate student. He'd only been starting up his lab for, I think, only a year, subsequent to my finishing, and et cetera. He's now a tenured professor at WashU. And my thesis work was on microtubule cytoskeleton. Because there was a movie, I included a movie. This is a, does that work? Yeah. So I was interested in how the microtubule cytoskeleton gets organized. I was particularly focused on the protein that's labeled in red here, which is N-binding 1, and the complex of things that go on at that growing end of the microtubule. But I hated bench research. And so as I neared the end, I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in the basement of the building, because microscopes are often kept in the basement so that you don't have the vibration of other things. And I was alone. Thank God for the iMessage, because we didn't have cell phone reception, so I could still text with my friends in the basement as I was collecting all of these movies and analyzing them. I had the largest number of hours on various of the microscopes. This particular one is taken from something that's a total internal reflection microscope. My father, who's a physicist, really hates the term total internal. He's like, because if it's total internal, then you wouldn't get any image whatsoever. Near total internal, so I'm advocating that they change the name, but it's not going very far. So not only did I work on that microscope, I worked on confocal and all sorts of other microscopes, and I was alone. And so I jokingly say that I became etiolated. And so I knew that I wasn't going to continue in basic research. The idea of going and being a postdoc was just absolutely horrifying to me. And so I actually became an EMT and was determined that I was going to drive an ambulance as what I was going to do with my PhD in plant biology, because I really wanted people and to be, above the surface. So my committee chair for my PhD committee, there was a job ad that came out that was for a law firm, and he was like, I think you would really like this. You really like writing. It's very interesting. They're looking for someone who's in plant biology. You should consider it. And I said, nope. So the job ad actually went out to the whole listserv, and no one applied. So the chair of my committee came back and he said, seriously, can I just send your CV? And I said, okay, sure, you can send my CV. And I had an interview with one of the people who continues to be my mentor, no longer with that firm, but with a global patent group. And full disclosure, my mother is a patent attorney, and so I knew what patent law was, but I had already determined that I didn't want to be in the same field as her. And I won't forget that conversation, because I got off the phone after my interview and I called my mom and I go, it's nothing like what you do. It's so cool. So after I finished my PhD, I took 2 days off in between finishing my thesis and starting, and those 2 days were Saturday and Sunday. And I worked at a global patent group for a year. My primary client was the Danforth Center. So after about a year of receiving bills with my name on it, I was sitting at a conference with my now boss, and he turned to me and said, have you ever thought about working for the Danforth Center? And I turned back to him and I said, is that an offer? So I came over to the Danforth Center. So when I talk about how long I've been at the Danforth Center, I say that I've been working with or for the Danforth Center for coming on 5 years now. And when I came over in 2014, I became the Director of Technology Transfer. I went from a department that had been outsourced to the law firm, Global Patent Group. So it was a department of 0 when I came in, so it was infinite growth. I made certain that my boss, knew that it was going to be all downhill from there. But in all reality, it's been a great deal of fun, and I'm really, really glad to be here to talk about what tech transfer is, which is my next slide. No 2 days are the same. Every single day is very different, and that is actually what's really exciting and engaging, and it's what causes me to get up in the morning and come to the center and work on stuff. So I do everything from technology evaluation, whether it's formally or informally. I attend a lot of the seminars that our graduate students and our research associates put on, so I'm certain that DTI has something similar to that as well. I do all of our material transfer agreements, so sometimes things are brought in and sent out, and it's important that we have the contracts and agreements regarding that. Confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements, those are not exciting, but really important. I am also registered to practice in front of the patent office. There's a bar exam. It's a national exam, so the patent office for most things makes no distinction between being a patent attorney and being a patent agent. So I'm not an attorney, but I'm an agent, so I do some of our patent drafting and prosecution. And then I really, really believe in the culture of bringing inventions beyond the bench. So the way that I often describe my job is I put taxpayer dollars to use, in that a portion of my paycheck and a portion of your paycheck goes to our federal government. Some of that funds comes back to the center, and my job is to make certain that the things that happen with those funds don't just result in a publication or a really happy postdoc. My job is to make certain that those bench experiments that are really exciting, that are really could have that, as you put into your broader impacts of your grants, or as you're talking to others about what it is you do, that they actually make that leap from being a bench experiment into the marketplace. And so I do anything that I can to help to further those discussions, to further the experiments, to bring funds into the Danforth Center. So anything that touches research and helps to promote that culture is of interest. I also thought I would leave you with one slide regarding where things that you can look. United States Patent and Trademark Office in Washington, D.C. The examiners there are highly trained individuals. Most of the people within the plant biology unit, 1600 art unit, actually do have PhDs or master's degrees in science. So if it is something that you're interested in, but you want to have a federal job, it's definitely worth looking into. There are all sorts of other resources on the PTO website that are if you're an entrepreneur or if you're an inventor, that are looking for. Law firms, I made the jump without a law degree from the bench into working as at that time, I was a patent scientist. I hadn't passed the patent bar. As far as tech management, there's the Association of University Tech Managers, which is autumn. They have an annual conference, but then they also have regional conferences that if you are interested, I'm happy to help to make some of those introductions. And then WashU has something called Office of Technology Management. I've forgotten what Cornell refers to theirs as. Obviously, tech transfer here at BTI. All of these people, honestly, most of us get into this because we sincerely love what we do. And so I really have not met any tech transfer person who hasn't welcomed a conversation. So if you just want to have a conversation and figure out what it is that we do, send us an email, look for the management program, and you'll probably find a friend and an advocate. So that's my story. I'm happy to answer questions later. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks to all our speakers.